The parts of the brain include the brainstem, where we have the medulla oblongata, we have the pons, and we have the midbrain. We also have the cerebellum, the diencephalon, which is the main area for the components such as the thalamus and the hypothalamus, and the telencephalon, where we have the cerebral hemispheres. The brain has the cerebral hemispheres, the right and left cerebral hemispheres, and these are separated by the longitudinal fissure, which is this structure right here. The separation is incomplete because at the bottom of the longitudinal fissure, there's a structure which is a large bundle of fibers that connect the right and left hemispheres, which is called the corpus callosum. This is the corpus callosum. Each hemisphere has 5 lobes. There's a frontal lobe, a parietal lobe, temporal, occipital, and the insula. There's 2 main sulci on the lateral surface of the cerebral hemispheres, the central sulcus, which separates the frontal and parietal lobes, and the lateral sulcus, which separates the temporal lobe from the frontal and parietal lobes. The insular lobe is located at the medial end of the lateral sulcus. Now let's talk about the arterial supply. Here we have the vertebral artery, which is a branch of the first part of the subclavian artery. It enters the cranial cavity via the foramen magnum. Here's again the vertebral artery. And so as you can see, there's a right and left vertebral arteries that join each other at the junction of the medulla and the pons to form the basilar artery, which is this structure right here. The basilar artery runs along the midline of the anterior surface of the pons. Here's the pons. And it ends at the upper end of the pons by dividing into a right and left posterior cerebral arteries, which is this one right here. The largest branch of the vertebral artery includes the posterior inferior cerebellar artery, and it also has other branches such as the anterior inferior cerebellar artery and the posterior cerebral artery. The vertebral and basilar arteries supply the spinal cord, the brainstem, the cerebellum, and the posterior parts of the cerebellar hemispheres. Another branch that supplies the brain is the internal carotid artery. This branch begins at the bifurcation of the common carotid artery at the level of the upper border of the thyroid cartilage. The parts include a cervical part, a petrous part, a cavernous part, and a cerebral part. The main branches include an ophthalmic artery that enters the orbit via the optic canal, together with the optic nerve, a posterior communicating artery that connects the internal carotid artery and the posterior cerebral arteries, and 2 terminal branches, an anterior and a middle cerebral arteries, also in the right and left anterior cerebral arteries that are connected to each other by an anterior communicating artery. So the union of all of these arteries going into the brain generates a structure called the cerebral arterial circle or circle of Willis. And this is formed by a large group of cerebral arteries and their interconnections on the ventral surface of the brain, as you can see right here. So the components include the anterior communicating artery, the anterior cerebral artery, the internal carotid artery, the posterior communicating artery, and the posterior cerebral artery. This serves as a potential vascular shunt, assisting in the development of collateral circulation if a proximal vessel is occluded.